In our headlines on this Wednesday, November 26th, here in South Korea. South Korea's Nuri space rocket is positioned onto its launch pad in Gyeongsang-do County ahead of its liftoff in the wee hours of this coming Thursday. And President Lee Jae-myung returns home today, having ended his four-nation tour of the Middle East and Africa aimed at promoting tangible partnerships. Meanwhile, at the White House on Tuesday, U.S. President Donald Trump claims negotiators are, quote, getting very close to a deal on ending Russian aggression against Ukraine. We're now counting down fewer than 24 hours to the fourth launch of South Korea's domestically produced Nuri space rocket. That being said, I turn now to my colleague Park Konu, standing by with the latest from the site of the planned launch. Konu, welcome. Now, yesterday you spoke of strong winds there. What's the weather like today, Konu?
Yes, sunny. It is sunny right now, as the weather can be a major variable for the launch. There have been some concerns, but conditions are generally fine at the moment. As I said, it's really sunny, a bit wind, but still, unlike yesterday when we had strong winds and passing rain, I might have looked way awful yesterday, but now I'm feeling okay. And then the strong wind advisory was also lifted this morning, and the area is forecast to see rain accompanied by lightning and sudden gusts later during the night, but luckily that's expected to come later after the scheduled launch window of around 1 a.m., so it's unlikely to affect the mission.
Good to know, Konu. So how are the preparations for the planned launch proceeding?
Right, so at the moment, all procedures remain on track. The installation of the Nuri rocket on the launch pad was done less than an hour ago, so we just learned that. And that's the same for connecting the rocket to the umbilical system, which supplies fuel and oxidizer, along with additional checkups to ensure there are no blockages or leaks in the system. These checks were pushed back from last night to this morning due to the weather. And that comes after the rocket was slowly transported to the launch pad and erected and secured in place the day before to ensure it remains stable even under strong winds. Also today, there will be a comprehensive inspection focusing mainly on the fueling system and electrical components. The actual loading of fuel and oxidizer will begin 4 hours prior to liftoff. And as of now, the estimated launch window is between 12:54 and 1:14 a.m. on Thursday, and the exact time will be finalized this evening at 8:15 p.m. after the Launch Management Committee reviews the weather conditions, the possibility of collision with space objects, and the overall readiness of the rocket. There are also backup dates running through December 4th in case of any bad weather conditions.
Hopefully the weather, Konu, will be pleasant in time for that launch. Meanwhile, what are some of the more remarkable aspects of this particular mission, Konu?
So first of all, this will be the very first nighttime launch, providing ideal conditions to observe natural light displays or auroras. And that's why the main satellite is being sent during the nighttime. So the mission's main satellite, along with 12 additional satellites up from the 7 carried in the previous launch 2.5 years ago, is set to be deployed into orbit. The goal is to reach an altitude of 600 kilometers with an air range of about 6%, while the primary measure of success will be whether the main satellite reaches its designated orbit. The estimated flight time is a little over 21 minutes, and the Korea Aerospace Administration will announce the results about an hour and 20 minutes after liftoff. And as manufacturing of this fourth vehicle was led entirely by the private company Hanwha Aerospace, this can mark a major milestone in transfer of technology and a broader shift toward a private sector-driven launch system. And I'll be keeping you updated around the clock, so stay tuned. And that's all for you now. Back to you, Sunny.
All right, Konu, thank you for the latest on Thursday's launch of South Korea's Nuri space rocket. President Lee Jae-myung landed at Seoul Air Base earlier on this Wednesday morning from Turkey, ending a 10-day four-nation tour of the Middle East and Africa. Our top office correspondent Song Yoo-jin walks us through the highlights of his latest diplomatic agenda.
A four-nation trip spanning 10 days. President Lee Jae-myung's first stop on his longest overseas trip yet was a state visit to the United Arab Emirates, South Korea's only special strategic partner in the Middle East.
아랍에미리트 연합이 아마 가장 큰 구체적 성과가 있는 것 같습니다. 거기는 사전에 비서실장이 특사로 가서 협업할 수 있는 분야들도 많이 정리했고 또 구체적 사업도 다 발굴을 했기 때문에.
Following his summit with UAE President Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, the two countries issued a joint declaration to strengthen their partnership and signed 7 MOUs. What stands out the most is the promise of cooperation in AI and defense. South Korea will join the UAE's multi-billion-dollar Stargate project and co-establish hyperscale AI data centers. In defense, the two sides agreed to jointly develop, produce, and even export weapon systems, which the presidential office says could lead to more than $15 billion in orders for Korean firms. From the UAE, President Lee traveled to Egypt, a country with 30 years of diplomatic ties with Korea. Lee said expectations for the summit had initially been modest, but his talks with President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, which ran nearly twice the scheduled time, unveiled new opportunities.
카이로 공항을 확장할 계획인데 거기가 아마 한 3-4조 원 정도 들지 않겠냐 이렇게 얘기를 하고 그걸 한국 기업들이 좀 맡아서 확장하고 운영도 해주면 좋겠다.
The two leaders agreed to broaden cooperation in international peace, the economy, and defense. MOUs on education and cultural exchange were signed. During his lecture at Cairo University, President Lee unveiled his vision for the broader Middle East, the SHINE initiative.
S는 스테빌리티, 안정을, H는 하모니, 조화를, I는 이노베이션, 혁신을, N은 네트워크를, E는 에듀케이션, 교육을 뜻합니다.
The trip's main event followed, the G20 summit in South Africa. Making his G20 debut, President Lee emphasized the need to make artificial intelligence globally accessible and the importance of restoring the multilateral trading system. Good news for South Korea was also made official.
G20 정상회의 출범 20년인 2028년 다시 의장직을 맡아 여정을 함께 이어가려 합니다.
On the sidelines, President Lee held his first bilateral talks with the leaders of France and Germany. Lee's final stop was Turkey, often called South Korea's brother nation bound by blood for its military contributions to the Korean War. Attention was on whether progress could be made on Korea's bid to join Turkey's Sinop nuclear power plant project. Presidents Lee and Recep Tayyip Erdogan agreed to deepen cooperation in defense, nuclear energy, and biohealth.
한국의 우수한 원전 기술과 안전 운영 역량이 튀르키예의 원전 개발에 실질적으로 기여할 수 있기를 바랍니다.
A joint statement was issued covering these areas, along with 3 MOUs on veterans affairs, nuclear energy, and road infrastructure. President Lee says his four-nation tour this time was about strengthening existing partnerships, uncovering new areas of cooperation, and laying a firmer diplomatic foundation. It remains to be seen how the agreements made during this trip will further expand South Korea's diplomacy, especially across the global south. 송유진, Arirang News.
In other news, U.S. President Donald Trump is maintaining his optimism with regard to a peace plan for Ukraine in the near future, claiming that tangible advances in talks have been made. His remarks stand in sharp contrast to the cautious tone adopted by leaders in Europe. Our Ising-jae has the latest.
U.S. President Donald Trump said Tuesday that a deal on a Ukraine-Russia peace plan is very close. Speaking at the White House during the annual Turkey partnering ceremony on Tuesday, Trump showed clear frustration that he has not yet delivered on his election promise to end the war quickly, but insisted progress is being made and said the two sides are getting very close to a deal.
I've also ended 8 wars in 9 months, and we're working on that final war. It's not easy, but I don't know. I think we're going to get there. I thought that one would have been gone quicker. We did 8. I thought that would have been an easier one, but I think we're making progress.
However, the reaction from Europe was far less hopeful. French President Emmanuel Macron said Tuesday that there is clearly no Russian willingness to agree to a ceasefire or engage seriously with the new, more Ukraine-friendly proposal. Macron delivered that message during a virtual meeting of the Coalition of the Willing group of Ukraine's European allies, co-chaired by UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer and Macron. He added that the coalition would maintain continued pressure on Moscow and reaffirmed that Europe will continue to support Ukraine with strength. While Europe voiced doubts, Turkey positioned itself once again as a mediator. Ankara says it's ready to host Ukraine-Russia talks once more. It said that negotiations could be organized in Istanbul and that Turkey is already in contact with both sides to prepare the process. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan also attended the Coalition of the Willing meeting, where he emphasized that Turkey will continue its diplomatic efforts to facilitate direct communication between Kyiv and Moscow in pursuit of a fair and lasting peace. As international pressure increases and diplomacy accelerates, the gap between American optimism and European caution remains wide, leaving the path to any settlement uncertain. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent believes there might be up to 4 meetings between President Donald Trump and Chinese leader Xi Jinping next year. Addressing an American broadcaster back on Tuesday, he said that Mr. Trump may travel to China twice in 2026, with a state visit to Beijing in April and to attend the APEC leaders meeting in Shenzhen in November. The Chinese leader is also expected to visit the U.S. twice, with a state visit to Washington, D.C., and to attend the G20 summit in Florida in December. Bessent went on to assert that the 4 separate interactions will offer their relationship great stability, which he added is good for the world economy. Earlier last week, there was an event in the city of Daejeon that sought to bring together creatively and constructively art and science centered on man. Our Cha Yun-kyung explains.
A 12-meter-wide screen displays an AI-restored image of Baekbum Kim-gu, who appears to read passages from the Baekbum-ilji, or the diary of Kim-gu, to the audience, reminding them of the spirit of 홍익인간 to bring broad benefit to humanity. It is a declaration of humanism, emphasizing that even the advance of science and technology must ultimately serve people. G-Artience 2025 Connecting Week, an international event discussing human-centered global tech art, the convergence of science, technology, culture, and art, was held as a national-level strategic event from November 16th to 18th at the Daejeon Convention Center.
By combining science and art, we can create new value, art that can grow into industry and lead to new jobs.
This event featured a variety of performances that connect tradition and modernity and science with the arts. As musicians express the emotion of Arirang through instruments such as the gayagum, koto, and violin, AI-powered visual imagery unfolded on the screen. The event also included presentations by young creators discussing how to build a human-centered tech art ecosystem.
I believe a convergence of science and art will prevail in the near future. Science and art may seem completely different, but they also share similarities. Both involve exploration and the pursuit of creativity.
As AI and digital technology spread across all areas of society, expectations are rising for new attempts to transcend the boundaries between science, technology, and the arts. Cha Yun-kyung, Arirang News.
This is The World Now, bringing you everything you need to know from around the globe. In Brazil on Tuesday, the country's Supreme Court ordered former President Jair Bolsonaro to begin serving a sentence of 27 years and 3 months for plotting a coup after losing the 2022 election. Justice Alexandra G. Moret ruled that the latest judgment is final with no appeals left. Bolsonaro, age 70, will continue to be held in federal police jail in Brasilia, where he has been detained since his home detention was terminated on Saturday after the former president was deemed a flight risk. He admitted to trying to remove his ankle monitor with a soldering iron. Bolsonaro was found guilty in September of leading a conspiracy to keep him in power following his election loss. Justices also said he was aware of plans to target the winning candidate, President Lula, and incited the 8th of January 2023 riots, which led to 1,500 arrests. He is barred from holding office until 2060. In India, flight operations were disrupted across Delhi and multiple cities after a massive volcanic ash plume from Ethiopia swept across the Red Sea and reached northern India, according to the India Meteorological Department on Tuesday. Air India cancelled 11 flights, while Indigo, Akasa Air, and KLM also reported cancellations, delays, or rerouting as regulators ordered airlines to strictly avoid affected airspace. The ash came from the Hale-Gubi volcano, which erupted Sunday after lying dormant for several thousand years, sending an ash column thousands of feet into the atmosphere. India says the ash cloud is not expected to have a major impact on air quality. In the U.S., a powerful tornado struck an area of Harris County outside the city of Houston on Monday, damaging more than 100 homes as a cold front pushed severe storms across the South. Images from NBC News showed houses in the neighborhood of Memorial Northwest with siding ripped away and debris scattered across streets. Officials said on Monday no deaths or serious injuries have been reported. About 28,000 customers in the Houston area lost power at the peak of the storm, though most service was restored by late Monday. In New York, auction house Christie's said on Tuesday it will auction the original 1976 partnership contract that created the Apple Computer Company, valuing it in the $2 to $4 million range. The three-page document signed by Steve Jobs, Steve Wozniak, and Ron Wayne set Apple's original stakes at 45%, 45%, and 10% respectively before Wayne sold his share for $800 days later. Christie's will offer the founding contract and Wayne's withdrawal agreement as a single lot at the January 23, 2026 sale. Chu Ji-hyun, Arirang News.
Hope you bundled up well this morning. The chill in the air was much sharper. Thursday's precipitation will bring sub-zero morning temperatures on Friday. Skies have gotten brighter, but the air quality is still something to watch. Ultrafine dust has eased compared to yesterday, but Chungcheong-pukdo and Gyeongsang-do provinces will stay in the bad range all day today due to the stagnant airflow. And this afternoon, Seoul will be getting up to 10 degrees Celsius, Daegu topping out at 13 degrees. And here's a quick update on the weather for the Nuri space rocket launch in Goheung. Winds will stay mostly light, but sudden gusts remain a key variable engineers are watching. As long as winds stay under safe limits, the launch schedule should move ahead smoothly. So there is rain in the forecast tomorrow, but starting from northern regions in the morning, and that rain will bring sudden cold snap on Friday before rising back above average this weekend.
And that's all we have for today's noon edition of Arirang News. Thank you for watching. Arirang News will be back at 5 p.m. Korea Standard Time, so do stay tuned.